My name, my name is Liza with Senior in Disability Action, and I'm excited to welcome you to our Know Your Rights protest training. We're going to go over some language justice interpretation, and I'd like to ask my colleague Ligia to please explain how folks who speak Spanish can access our language interpreters today.
Um, do you want me to do it in English or Spanish? Or both? Or
Both.
both? Okay. Um, Hi, everybody. So I'm Ligia. I'm with Senior and Disability Action. Um, Please, if you are in a computer, you can go um, to um, is that a glove? Because I already put it in there. It's a like a little glove for the earth, and when you click on it, you're gonna see English and Spanish. Please choose the language that you will be listening. This is for everybody. So if you speak English, go there on the interpretation and choose English. And you can mute the original audio after. That's optional, but you can do that. And then if you're in the if you oh yes. Sorry. Um, just so you know, we do this because we believe in language justice, and we wanted to make sure that that people has options, when it comes to participate. And so there's a few tips that we would like to ask you
Find that.
to follow, when you are talking, speak slowly and clearly. Think about key points you want to make and keep it brief so you can take your time. Don't use acronyms or jargon, and stick to one language, which I'm not gonna do right now for this. Okay, so estamos tratando de practicar la justicia del lenguaje y pues aquí ofrecemos interpretación, y si usted habla español o inglés, cualquiera de los dos idiomas, ahorita tenemos interpretación para, para las personas que van a participar y hablan español. Por favor, váyanse al globo terráqueo en la parte de abajo del Zoom, y allí ustedes pueden hacer un clic y escogen el lenguaje que necesitan. Ahí tienen dos opciones, inglés y español. Por favor, escojan su idioma, y una vez que lo escogieron, elijan el mudo para el audio original. Y algunos consejos que tenemos es que por favor hable despacio y claro. Piense sobre los puntos principales que desea cubrir y sea breve. No use siglas o jerga. Comparta en el idioma que eligió. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ligia, and thank you to our Spanish interpreters. If anyone needs tech support help at any time during the training, we have some volunteers available, so please feel free to put a need in the chat and we will get back to you. Today's agenda, we'll be starting with an orientation and then we'll be going into our legal Know Your Rights training with our guest speaker attorney. After that, we will have a brief lived experience panel and a live question and answer period. This training will be recorded up until the question and answer period. So if you would not like to have your name, video, or any other private details included in the training, make sure that you rename yourself and do not go off mic. My name is Liza, and I am Education and Partnerships Manager at Senior and Disability Action. It's my pleasure to host this training for our community, and I am a mixed race Azerbaijani Jewish Bay Area organizer and a disabled and chronically ill first generation child of immigrant refugees. Senior and Disability Action is a nonprofit organization composed of senior and disability activist staff and member volunteers organizing to make our city and the world a place where seniors, people with disabilities, and all diverse communities can thrive. We've existed in San Francisco for over 30 years with a singular focus on elder and disability justice organizing. We organize issue campaigns born from the lived experiences of seniors and disabled people in the communities we work with and are part of, and we serve our community through education and peer support. Some political goals for this training. We seek to grow the united front against attacks on the working class, seniors, disabled people, and immigrants who make up our communities. As we speak now, we understand that mass deportations have escalated, and there are many efforts in the Bay Area to support immigrants through community defense. At the same time, attacks on basic social services that impact seniors and disabled people, including cuts to Medicaid and Medicare, will have devastating impacts on our communities. We seek to empower a wider base of the community to participate in protests, community defense, and rapid response. Our goal is also to deepen solidarity between event organizers and senior and disability communities, as well as to center agency for seniors and disabled people choosing to participate in protest. That means that we respect the autonomy of people to make their own judgments about risk assessment and choose to engage in actions, even if there is some risk to them. Some community access guidelines for today's training. Please mute your mic when not speaking. Try to eliminate or reduce background sounds. Participate with as good of an internet connection as feasible. Keep your camera on and keep your camera still if it's turned on. Avoid blurred or artificial backgrounds unless you need them for privacy, as that can make some people queasy or dizzy. A few ways we will honor our commitment to collective access at this meeting includes live captioning and language interpretation. We will be reading slides and chat aloud when possible. Please put read me or read aloud in front of chat messages that you would like spoken. We'll also be sharing materials such as this training after the meeting, and we have tech support help and volunteers to help you with any access needs during the next hour and a half. Before we jump in, I want to update you on a couple of important actions that our organization is participating in. We'll also be sharing these with you in an email after the training. Firstly, our transit justice team is organizing a transit summit on August 20th from 5 to 7 p.m. at the San Francisco Public Library. Muni is on track to cut 30% of service in the next 2 years. This is going to have devastating impacts on low-income communities and seniors and disabled people who rely on public transportation to access the external world. If you are dependent on Muni or care about public transit, we invite you to join us at 5 to 7 p.m. at the San Francisco Public Library on August 20th. You can contact our staff member Mia at sdaction.org for more details. Next, we are mobilizing on September 1st to rally against San Francisco's attempted RV ban. San Francisco is seeking to criminalize homelessness, tow people's homes, and displace 400 mostly immigrant families. We need folks to show up for our neighbors and say that it is unethical to take away housing from folks who are homeless. Please be in touch with our housing community organizer, Ocean, for more details about this action. Next, I want to uplift SDA's Community Resource Program. This is our referral and information agency staffed by peer advocates and counselors with lived experience as disabled, senior, formerly homeless, and low-income Bay Area residents. This is a start point to learn how to navigate common issues. We are not a direct service organization, but our peer counselors can give you referrals to organizations that can help you with your issues and are up to date on which organizations are taking requests and can help in some cases with a warm handoff to make sure that your issue is taken care of. You can contact us at 415-546-1333 or contact Damara at sdaction.org for more information. Our office is open for in-person counseling on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Next, I'm excited to share our empowerment and education programs. You can contact me after this training to learn about the in-person workshops and education offerings we offer to neighborhoods across San Francisco. The name of this program is Senior and Disability Survival School. Lastly, we ask that you support our work. We are a small organization committed to winning local changes for seniors, disabled people, and historically marginalized communities under the threat of displacement in the Bay Area. Please support our work so we can continue to operate our programs free of charge to this community and continue to offer comprehensive accessibility. One way you can support us is by attending our community celebration and fundraiser on August 14th. I'll be sharing a link in the chat for you to buy tickets at various different price points. This is an amazing opportunity for us to come together, celebrate all of the wins that we've had this past year, and fortify our communities for the struggles ahead. This is also an important fundraising opportunity for Senior and Disability Action to continue sustainably doing this work. And with that, I'm very excited to hand the microphone over to Michael, who will be leading our legal training for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Liza, and thanks everyone at Senior and Disability Action for having me. I'm happy to be here to be a part of mutual aid supporting movements for change, and it's also been a great opportunity to learn more about the work of your organization. I'm going to turn on share screen here. Was someone trying to make a comment or question? Oh, it looks like Jillian, I hear some audio, but it's kind of muffled. All right. The audio sounds very muffled. I can't understand what you're saying, Jillian, if you're trying to speak to me. Maybe you could adjust your audio settings or put it in the chat. All right. Well, I'm part of the Flynn Law Office is my law firm, and I'm also part of the Oakland Law Collaborative. There we go. And the Oakland Law Collaborative is a volunteer collective or cooperative of lawyers and legal workers. We share an office and we collaborate in supporting movements for social justice and human rights. We each have our own separate law firms as far as our business and income, but again, we came together because we have a shared passion for collective liberation. And I'm part of the way that Liza got in touch with me was through the Bay Area demonstrations, legal support collaboration, which I will talk a little bit more about in a couple slides. And most of my work is employment law, discrimination, harassment, retaliation at work, also wage and hour type cases, immigration, and civil rights and police misconduct, including multiple cases, class actions involving demonstrators who were subjected to police excessive force or other constitutional violations. And I'm also do prisoner rights cases. So the general agenda for today is we're going to talk about know your rights. We're going to talk about the current what that means in the current repressive political climate, and we'll have an opportunity for Q&A. This slide kind of recaps what I described already about my practice. I will add here, like the slide mentions, I'm from Oklahoma originally, although I've been in California and Oakland now most of my life. And I've been doing anti-racism and racial justice and human rights type work ever since high school age. And I have Irish and Dutch and Portuguese heritage, um, and a few generations back. It's important to understand what is attorney-client privilege. Attorney-client privilege protects the confidentiality of communications between an attorney and client whenever we're consulting about a specific legal issue that relates to a specific scenario. This presentation is more of general information. So in one way, we could interpret it as a attorney-client privilege in the context of a consultation with the organization, but that's a more loose level of protection compared to if I were to give a one-on-one consult with someone here or in any situation in my role as a lawyer. Um, when I give consultation or advice about a particular situation, that is more clearly the attorney-client confidential type communication. If someone repeats what was an attorney-client protected communication to someone else, there's a risk of losing that. So saying like my attorney said this or that attorney said that, as to a particular matter that's confidential or sensitive could lead to the loss of that protection. Someone could say like, well, I went to a presentation and I learned about my rights and I learned about the Fourth Amendment and the First Amendment and disability discrimination laws. And that's an example of how to talk about it without losing that protection. And keep in mind that there will be opportunities for questions during the presentation and at the end. But please refrain from sharing anything about your own personal situation or any other specific person. If you want to ask a question, you can ask it in a more general way of like in a sort of third person. Like, what if a person is in this type of situation at a protest? Then what would be their rights? That's a way to ask it in a general way. And like Liza referenced, we're in a um, very difficult situation right now that could cause a lot of despair and frustration and loss of hope for people. And we're here to support each other and give each other hope and strength. And of course, we're understanding that we're learning about our rights in the context of extreme racism, anti-immigrant racism, and anti-disability discrimination and persecution, and cuts to programs and funding. And the executive orders from the president that target immigrants and people who stand up for justice, and a neo-McCarthyist, fascist type suppression of speech right now. The government is often refusing to follow the law or respect the law. We're losing what democracy we have, and there's also related to all this are the travel bans. The San Francisco Bay Area Demonstrations Legal Support Collaborative. It involves the organizations that are on this slide. The Center for Protest Law and Litigation is an organization that has an office here also as part of the Oakland Law Collaborative, and they litigate in defense of protesters' rights and also help to consult and give trainings and provide support through the Legal Support Collaborative here in the Bay Area. The collaborative also includes the National Lawyers Guild. Folks have probably heard and seen at protest with the green hats that say legal observer. And the Legal Solidarity Bay Area is part of our collaborative, and those are legal workers in a collective that operate a hotline that people can call when they're in jail. And on an upcoming slide, there'll be that phone number. The Bay Area Anti-Repression Committee helps to provide support in the form of education, referrals, and they have a bail fund. And then, like I mentioned, the Oakland Law Collaborative is a group of radical lawyers and legal workers. We share space and work together to support movements. Now, this slide's important if you're going to attend a protest, and whether or not you expect to get arrested, it's good to know the legal hotline, 510-250-1700. And some people might have been familiar with a different number that had been used in some years past that was uh, explicitly the NLG or exclusive or kind of controlled by the NLG. This is a new hotline number that's been in the use for a few years now by the collaborative, because the collaborative is a grouping that includes NLG and other groups. This slide also has a hotline for if someone gets visited by FBI or law enforcement, like they come to your door or approach you at your work or business to try to talk to you. We'll talk about what to do in that situation more specifically, but this slide has the phone number to call, 415-285-1041 or 415-508-4955. And that's a way to get a consultation with a lawyer who's familiar with those issues. The slide also has the link to the legal support request form, where you could go if you're an organizer and you want to ask for legal observers, a hotline, like criminal defense attorneys if people are already arrested, and know your rights trainings too. And then this slide also has the Alameda County Rapid Response number and the San Francisco Rapid Response number. And these are for reporting activity of immigration, ICE. If it's in progress, if you alert the hotline can help mobilize people. So the legal support collaboration, we provide consultations, trainings, legal observers, hotline, and can provide lawyers. To the extent our capacity allows, we generally have been able to provide or arrange for criminal defense lawyers for people who get arrested at protests, and as well as consultations on like employment issues that might relate to protest activity, immigration related consultations, and also the possibility of civil rights litigation based on police misconduct. And as people who are organizing or supporting organizers, it's helpful to understand what role is expected of the organizers. Requesting legal support as far in advance as possible is the best way to do it. And also to organize support people for anyone who's risking arrest at a demonstration. And support people can help to make sure that medication is available, help to seek accommodations for disabilities, help to make sure kids or pets are safe, help to communicate with a job, perhaps if someone's going to miss a shift, for example. And support people can also call the hotline to update if they have information about someone who got arrested or who's in jail and has special needs or urgent needs. We can make requests on the hotline and share concerns that the collaborative might be able to respond to. We also expect organizers to help plan for jail support and court support. So that looks like if people are in jail, it's nice when there's people outside, when the people are released from jail, to welcome them and maybe give them food and help to make sure they have transportation and their needs are met. Court support means having supporters show up to court whenever that's what the strategy is agreed on, to help keep the pressure on, make sure charges get dropped. And then if there are arrests, we also expect the legal support folks, like from the organizers and the organization, to help do the arrestee outtake. So that's part of jail support, usually getting, or even while people are in jail, right after the arrest, right, to provide the complete legal name, date of birth, contact info, and court dates for people who are arrested. If the legal support folks have the name, complete legal name, and date of birth, we can look up online the information about their pending charges and court dates. And if you're going to go to a protest, this slide has information about how to protect yourself. If someone's going to a protest and are not intending to be like visibly a focus, or like sometimes people, are intending to get arrested, maybe a lockdown, for example, then that might not be a concern. But if you're not planning on being, an arrest target, or just want to have concerns about being identified in photos or on the internet, wear unremarkable clothing, cover tattoos. Think about how if you yourself are seen in videos or pictures, or other people around you are in videos or pictures, are they going to be identifiable and targeted or doxxed by people who are against what we support, for example? And if you're going to bring a bag or backpack to a protest, best idea is to pack minimal necessities: water, snack, sweater, hoodie. And because keep in mind that if someone's arrested, the bags will be searched. And so anything in there that could get you in trouble or be used to incriminate you or other people would be a bad idea. So that includes any kind of contraband, notes, date book, maps, walkie-talkies, things that show that you were planning with other people to take some kind of action could be misconstrued against you later, based on some scenarios we've seen and we'll talk about now, where they are charging people with conspiracy. And the safest, as far as your phone, if you're going to get arrested, or even if you don't plan on it and you end up getting arrested, it might be bad if the police get a hold of your phone and then use that to find information about your friends and colleagues, people you organize with, and try to use that against you. Even if it should be protected by the First Amendment, the cops and prosecutors still might try to use it against you. So you want to make sure your phone is secure with a password, 4 digits or more, and don't use the facial recognition or fingerprint unlock method, because the police could just hold your phone in front of you or put your finger on the phone to be able to unlock it. And even if you don't intend to, even if you don't unlock your phone, there's a way police can make a copy of the phone too. And like generally speaking, let me get some water. As a general rule, you wouldn't want to bring anything to the protest that's super valuable that you wouldn't want to lose or get damaged, because there's a chance that it could. So jewelry is going to be taken at the jail. They should be tracking what property is taken and giving it back to you, but of course, there's no guarantee that something unexpected might happen. And we'll talk a little bit more about medications later, but the general advice is if you really need it, then just bring what you need in the original prescription bottle. And we'll talk more about the challenges to access later. This slide talks about the levels of interaction with the police within the context of the Fourth Amendment. So the Fourth Amendment is part of the Bill of Rights that's supposed to protect us from unreasonable search and seizure by the government. And it's helpful to think about levels of interaction with the police. A voluntary interaction might be a conversation with police. We'll talk more about this, but we suggest don't talk to the police. And a detention would be the next level. The cops are supposed to have reasonable suspicion to be able to detain someone. And an arrest is the next level, which is a situation where the police have probable cause or supposed to have probable cause that the person committed a crime. And when we're talking about ICE, immigration enforcement, the same general rights apply. Even if the police don't always respect them, right? But everyone should still have the right to freedom of expression under the First Amendment, the right to remain silent under the Fifth Amendment, the right to have an attorney or talk with an attorney under the Fifth and Sixth Amendments, and the right not to consent to assert under the Fourth Amendment. Whether a citizen or not, everyone within the US has these rights or is supposed to have them. And if someone is in a situation where they encounter the police and the police try to talk to them on the street, we recommend stay calm and walk away if possible. And if you're trying to run and hide or flee, then that could raise suspicion from the police or leading to them trying to use some kind of force. And if you cannot walk away, you could say something like, I don't want to speak to you. Am I free to go? Am I being detained or arrested? And if the cops do say that the person is being detained or arrested, or is not, sorry, if they don't say the person is being detained or arrested, then you should be free to walk away. And if someone is detained or arrested, then we recommend saying something like this: I'm going to remain silent. I don't consent to a search, and I want to speak with an attorney. And keep in mind that even if someone does start talking to the police, at any point they can stop talking and assert their right to remain silent. And what do folks think about this question? Is it legal for the police to lie to you?
Yes.
That's right. They can lie, but if you lie to the police, then you could get charged with a crime. So that's why it's better just to remain silent. Don't try to like explain your way out of a situation. Oops. Okay, so this slide, I'm encouraging everyone to verbalize and say these statements out loud, because if you practice verbalizing it now, then you can more confidently say it when the situation comes up. So I'm going to remain silent. I do not consent to a search, and I want to speak to an attorney. And if someone's going to a protest, especially if there's a risk of arrest or an intention of getting arrested, then it's really important to have a safety plan. The safety plan should involve, communication, and being informed about the Bay Area Legal Support Collaborative, that earlier slide, and the hotline. And let's see, NLG also has a public demonstrations hotline you can find on their website that is for people who want to find out information about people inside. That's 415-909-4NLG or 4654. However, the regular hotline, the 510-250-1700, can also be used to find out information about family or friends inside, or share information, right? There might be limitations on sharing confidential information, of course, by the hotline people. So good idea to memorize these phone numbers, and memorize the phone numbers of supporters to call in case you get arrested. And if someone has like kids or pets or someone who needs special medical attention or assistance that depend on them or who depend on them, then they should make a plan about what happens if the person going to the protest gets arrested and they're in jail for a day or two or more. Then who's going to help take care of those dependents? And also a good idea to make sure that you have important documents stored in a safe place such that you could direct someone who needs to find them, like in your home, for example, where they might be. So it could be like a birth certificate, immigration paperwork. And part of the safety plan should involve having support people identified who agree to help with disability accommodations if needed. Perhaps take a service animal if someone gets arrested or a mobility device. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. And if someone has a question about something I've said so far that seems unclear to you, you can ask now. If it's a more like substantive, longer question for discussion, keep in mind we have the Q&A session at the end.
Michael, we got a question. Do these phone numbers include
May I have
for
your attention,
detained
please? The library
by
will be
ICE?
closing in 20.
So I heard the first part of the question about do the hotline phone numbers include what?
Are the hotline phone numbers relevant for ICE detention if someone is detained by ICE? I believe that's the question. If the person who put it in the chat wants to clarify, please let me know.
I can answer, I think, either way. So if someone is detained, if someone's at a protest and they're in any kind of custody or jail or detention center, then the purpose of the hotline is to provide support for those people. If someone, um, if it's like independent, I guess, of a protest or demonstration, and someone ends up in ICE custody or immigration detention, they could call the let's see, I'm going back to the rapid response phone numbers on this slide here. Alameda County is 510-241-4011, and San Francisco is 415-200-1548. And if for some reason they don't accept a call from the jail or detention center, you could try the hotline. Keep in mind the demonstrations hotline, only operates on a like as needed, as requested basis. Okay, I'm moving back to where we left off on the slides. Let's see, now we're at digital security tips. Okay, so I talked a little bit about this already, right? Password's better than Face ID or fingerprint. The police can make a copy of your phone if it gets taken. And there could be arguments about whether they have a right to, but keep in mind the police don't always respect our rights. Remember to use encryption for sensitive communications, such as Signal or Proton Mail. Keep in mind that if people are talking about their demonstration type activity on a university or employee email account or Wi-Fi, that's not secure. It could be monitored by the authorities or the employer or university. And of course, be careful who you're talking to about what. And if you must take a photo or video of an event, of a demonstration, do crowd shots, not selfies. Be respectful of not trying to avoid exposing other people to danger, harm, or threats. If their face ends up on the internet and people that don't like what they're doing try to identify them. For those reasons, we don't recommend live streaming. And it's also a good idea to think about if there's going to be a likelihood of counter protesters to have a safety plan about that. This slide talks about identification documents. So In California, there's not a legal requirement that someone has to, show an ID to police upon just like a request. However, if police have a suspicion that someone like committed a crime, um, then they do have a right in a way or authority to try to identify that person. And if someone doesn't have a government ID on them, then the police could potentially argue that, oh, well, we can't identify you, so we need to take you to the police station and get you fingerprinted. And if people are arrested at a protest, having a government ID, like a local ID that shows, for example, that you live here in the Bay Area, can help you to get cited and released quicker, and also help to prevent any detention or prolonged detention or jailing, because part of the analysis for whether to release someone on their own recognizance or bail before a court date is, are they a flight risk? And so if someone has a local residence, a local job, community connections, those are the types of things they look for to help show that, oh, look, this person is not a risk of not a flight risk. It's not a good idea to carry documents, identity documents from another country, um, because that could be used to show that the person is not a US citizen. And even though the local police are not supposed to collaborate with immigration authorities, don't some cops might might not respect those restrictions, or might want to be immigration or something like that. So that's why, again, it's better to have like some kind of local ID, not a foreign ID.
Michael, a question. Is it advisable to live stream abusive detentions carried out by ICE agents so that the video footage can be secured remotely, even if ICE seizes one's phone?
I think that's a good exception. So if you are going to video or film or even live stream, um, probably better just to video, I guess, in that situation, right? Because if it's to finish my sentence, if you are going to video or photo, focus on the cops and what they're doing, right? The idea is you don't want to get other people at the demonstration on your video, because then the authorities or people who are against what you're doing might use that to help identify and target those people. So, like if you're live streaming the police beating up someone, and then someone else comes to try to intervene and stop the police from beating them, and then that's on your live stream, then the cops might be able to use that just to say that the second person who was trying to intervene was assaulting an officer or engaging in what they call lynching. That's like trying to free someone from police custody. Of course, like some organizations, have a might, as a specific intentional strategy, be live streaming what's happening at a demonstration or lockdown as a way to get publicity and support their cause. But presumably, they're going to do that in a way that's thoughtful, considerate, respectful, safe, to not unnecessarily or unintentionally expose people. All right, so continuing on the slide about identity documents. Um, if someone doesn't have a valid immigration status under the federal law, then their California ID has like a mark on it, saying like federal restrictions apply or something like that. So that's something to keep in mind. But even if that's the case, it's better to have that type of ID than carry like a foreign passport or consular ID. And it's also better to have a ID that matches your own gender identity, because that can help with seeking the appropriate type of accommodation in jail. And in the context of dealing with law enforcement or going to jail, it is good to know about your rights, even if the police don't always respect those rights. Um, so the 14th Amendment right to equal protection is supposed to prohibit discrimination based on race or gender, or other protected status. We have the Americans with Disabilities Act, of course, that prohibits discrimination based on disability and requires accommodations. Title VII that prohibits racial discrimination in employment. 42 USC 1983 is a way to sue for constitutional violations by government. And there's state laws here too, like the Unruh Civil Rights Act. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The Bain Act and the Ralph Act, um, and other laws that prohibit discrimination based on protected characteristics like race, skin color, ethnicity, disability, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. And we'll talk more about the right to request reasonable accommodations in later slides. And in the past, I've had questions about the right to protest on private property, is why I added this slide to my Know Your Rights presentation here. And there's been some litigation over the years, but the general takeaway is that private businesses or private property owners can exclude people, but if they open up a space to as a public forum, like for example, like a shopping center that has like a place to gather where people are, or it's shown that it's like people are welcome to gather there. There's benches or fountains, things like that. Then that could make it a semi-public forum where certain First Amendment rights might apply. And if someone is arrested at a protest, keep in mind, again, you don't need to answer any questions from the police beyond like basic like identifying yourself, similar to what we already discussed about, carrying the ID. And remember, you have the right to remain silent and to have an attorney or talk to an attorney, even if you don't already have an attorney identified. And a lot of people might think that, oh, the police didn't read me my Miranda rights about, your right to remain silent and all that. They're not required to read those rights in every arrest situation. It's only if they're going to interrogate someone while they're being detained or arrested. And the slide also mentions, like I referenced a little bit earlier, that typically police are supposed to cite and release with a citation, misdemeanor type arrest, especially at demonstrations. That, that's not a guarantee that I always do that, but having a valid photo ID helps with that process. So again, after arrested, remember to stay silent other than asking for a lawyer and answering basic booking questions that would be like your identity and address. For example, so they could send a court citation or court notices to you. Keep in mind that general advice applies to the police officers, sheriffs, deputies, and so on. In the San Francisco and Alameda County jails, there is a process where people might be interviewed by pretrial services or something similar to that to determine if the person is eligible for release based on the criteria I mentioned earlier. Not being a flight risk and not being a danger to the community. So that person who interviews might ask about uh, um, like local ties to the community, local residents and job and so on. And we haven't heard about a situation where like the cops try to pose as someone from the pretrial services for the early release. Um, so that shouldn't happen, but if you have doubts, you could always just ask the person to identify themselves, show their business card, something like that. So remember, if it's police, say, I don't want to talk to you, I want a lawyer. And even if you start talking, you can stop and assert your rights. And the cops can lie, but you don't want to lie to them. And if you are on the jail phones, those lines are recorded. So nothing should be discussed on the jail phones or including calling the hotline. beyond like things the cops already know. Like I was arrested at this demonstration. If you have a citation, for example, if there was some kind of citation such that you're aware of the charges, you could say what the charges are. You could say what the cops told you, but you don't want to, go into any details about what you were doing or what other people were doing at the time of arrest, or share any information that can be used against you or other people. And after demonstrations arrest, there should be jail support uh, available. We talked about that earlier as far as what the organizers do and what the Legal Support Collaborative does. The Legal Support Collaborative, we do not ask that people provide us in advance with a list of names of people who might be risking arrest, but it is if people are intending to risk arrest, it could be smart for the organizers to gather the legal names and dates of birth in case the people do get arrested, and then they can quickly turn that information over to the hotline, and so that the legal team can track what's happening with their custody and potential charges. And keep in mind that just because the police put a certain penal code section, I see the question, I'll finish what I'm saying first. Just because the cops put a certain penal code section on a citation does not mean that someone ultimately will be charged with that section or that charges will ever be filed. The district attorney, prosecutor, has up to a year to decide whether they're going to file charges for most types of misdemeanors. Could be longer for felonies. And the district attorney makes that decision based on what evidence is available, like the police report, video, their resources to prosecute, and political pressure too. I see Mara has a question. Go ahead.
Actually, somebody else in the chat had a great question that I'm very curious about. What's the legal stance on wearing helmets or hard hats, or I think the person also mentioned air filters, which would seem to be that would be more of a disability issue, but can
Right.
they use that against you?
Okay, yeah, I understand the question. Um, so police, prosecutors often do try to twist the facts and circumstances in their favor. And even if there was no intention or action or conduct, they might try to put the accusation on someone. And so there have been situations where they try to use the fact that someone, had like protective gear or a shield to suggest that they were intending to somehow like, engage in some type of like assaulting activity towards police. But someone can also respond in the in the appropriate situation if needed, like in the context of maybe a criminal case. Well, I wore a helmet because I had seen that police were, being violent and shooting people or hitting people at other demonstrations, so I wanted to protect myself. And as far as a like a mask or respiratory type mask, I'm going to talk about a little bit more about that later. But same idea, right? The cops might twist it and to say that someone's trying to cover their identity to commit a crime, whereas we know that people often wear masks to protect their own sensitive health condition. If someone is like engaging and like spray painting a wall while they're wearing a mask, for example, or throwing something at the police, then those sort of like combined facts, of course, could end up being used by the police or prosecutor to suggest the person was wearing the mask to conceal their identity so they could commit the alleged crime.
Thank you very much. And actually, I have to leave, but it's not an editorial departure. I just
Okay,
have an appointment. Thank you.
appreciate that. All right, so I have the next few slides I prepared added to the presentation based on preparation for this presentation today. So protesters with disabilities and limited mobility. What do folks think are good ideas that organizers of demonstrations can do or should do to make the demonstrations more accessible? And people can speak up now if you have ideas.
Feel free to go off mute or put something in chat that I can read out loud.
Any ideas? I'm not able to keep up with the chat while I'm presenting, so if anyone sees something you want to read, go ahead. I put some
Someone
hints
wrote,
on here. Go ahead.
share info about route or location.
Okay, yes, that's a good idea. And I put on the slide, of course, like if there's going to be people who have limited mobility, then maybe have them lead the march to make sure that everyone can stay together. And keeping in mind if there's people that might have limitations on their ability to hear or see, then having the appropriate visual and sound aids. Any other thoughts or ideas on how to make demonstrations more accessible? Oh, I see it's 7:59 and I'm supposed to end at 8, huh? Okay, so I better speed up. Um, all right. Okay, so as far as accommodation goes, keep in mind that the police or whatever entity that's supposed to accommodate needs to have notice. Because if they don't have notice of a need to accommodate, then they're going to say, oh, their obligations were not triggered. So there could be verbal notice, there could be written notice, and there could be notice with the assistance of a support person. So verbal notice could be like, hey, I have like a sensitive health condition and I really need to wear my COVID mask. Um, and so, even if they make you take it off momentarily, like, well, please let me keep it. If someone has challenges, is that a question or comment for us? I could not hear very well what was said, if that was intended to be a comment or question. Okay, I'm going to move on to so example of written notice might be having like a piece of paper or a sign or a doctor's note with you, or even like a notepad to help write down messages, can be a helpful way to provide notice. And for people who have limited mobility, keep in mind that it might be difficult to keep up with a march in some situations, right? Um, Sometimes it might be difficult to flee from police violence. Um, there's things to do to help mitigate those concerns or risk, right? Which would be, like we discussed, reaching out to organizers in advance to make special requests or inquiries, having support people with you, and being prepared with a safety plan before and during to help make sure that everyone can stay safe and together. And there have been situations I know in the past, like for example, whenever people in wheelchairs were intended to lock down as a First Amendment activity and intended to likely get arrested, and someone called the police chief, like a police liaison for the organizers, for example, could call the police department and let them know that there's going to be this demonstration and there's could be people that might get arrested and that they should uh, make appropriate accommodations for people with wheelchairs or mobility devices. Keep in mind that there's no guarantee that the police will make appropriate accommodations, or and so if there's something is a like a really valuable motorized wheelchair, it might be a good idea to not use that and use an alternate if that's possible to help avoid it being damaged or lost. I
May
did
I ask
reach
a
out. Go
question?
ahead.
Yeah, what is exactly is medical housing? It says placed in medical housing when person needs accommodations.
All right, so that was my next point that I did in advance of today reached out to the San Francisco Sheriff's Department at the jail to ask some questions about their accommodation policies. and I was able to get a copy of it too. And the initial verbal response on the phone was what I wrote here that, and I saw in the policy something similar, right? That so like if someone has a motorized wheelchair, they would put it in their basement to store like with other property. That's like considered like a bulk property item. That the idea would be that they would give it back to you after you're released. And they had the person I talked to on the phone said they have a special medical housing program, I guess area at the jail for people who need disabilities accommodations. I don't have more specific detail than that right now. But if there's specific questions, we could cover that.
Michael,
Uh,
before we move on, I'm wondering if you could go back 2 slides, one more. Yeah, so it sounds like what you're saying is that the police need to be informed that somebody has a disability in order to then accommodate whatever accessibility needs someone is requesting. If there's not a police liaison or organizers don't want to be speaking to police before an action, what are some ways that an individual can inform police that they have an accessibility need um, during a detention or right before they're being arrested?
it's a good question. Right, so the police do need notice, so either verbally or in writing, or with assistance of other people, um, someone should let the police know about uh, one that they have like some type of disability or limitation, right? That is related to a disability, and then what is their particular accommodation that they need, and so that might, be like if someone needs access to a bathroom, for example, then they need to verbalize that and let the police know. Um, I have such and such, I have a health condition that requires that I need regular access to a bathroom. And so I want to make sure that I will have access within the next hour or something like that. Or I can't walk without this cane or assistance. And so I'm asking you to allow me to keep this.
We have some questions from chat. Is
Go ahead.
medical housing available for people who are immunosuppressed and or need daily or as needed access to medications? What will they do with leg braces?
I don't have the specific details on what they provide in medical housing or not, but the general idea is that the police in this jail are obligated to provide reasonable accommodations. And what is reasonable is the legal definition is it's not an undue burden. So I think that medical housing should be a way to help keep people, like if they don't want to be exposed to other people in a large area, for example, then the medical housing or sometimes like a sort of isolation, administrative segregation has been used where people can't be placed with like a larger group type setting. This slide talks about service animals. And the general takeaway is that you cannot expect that the police are going to allow you to bring a service animal with you if you're arrested or taken to jail. Um, uh, you wouldn't want your service animal to be impounded. Um, so I put on here some information, a firsthand experience from someone who has been arrested with a service animal, and they said that they make a plan for their dog to be with someone else, or for maybe if there was an actual intention to get arrested, then there could be someone there to help take the dog before it's too late. And this person also said that when they asked the police or jail authorities about bringing their service animal, they were told no. This slide talks more about medications, masking, COVID safety, and accommodations for people with who are blind, have low vision. or a limited hearing. So again, if you really, really need medication and you can't skip it in, a matter of like 12, 24, 48 hours, then you have to understand there's a risk that even if you brought your own medication in its original prescription bottle, there's a chance the police might take it and not allow you to have it. You can advocate the best you can in the ways we've discussed by like verbally and writing to insist that you need access to that medication. Um, and having a doctor's note or the prescription, like the original prescription and a doctor's note, I guess, right, would a way to be double sure about um, uh, about that you're doing everything you can to seek that accommodation. And I did talk a little bit earlier about ways to kind of verbalize perhaps a need to maintain a COVID mask. There's no guarantee that the police are going to respect that, but if you if you do at least assert your rights and there's witnesses or documentation that you did assert your rights and later there's some type of harm that occurs because the police did not give the accommodation, that helps to be able to hold them accountable. And then we also talked about people who have limitations on their vision or hearing, that a police liaison could ask for accommodations in advance, like a written notice of orders. And the person could also carry with them a kind of written request and documentation from a doctor or health professional about the need and a notepad to help communicate. This slide talks a little bit more about the legal landscape that I've already covered somewhat. Americans with Disabilities Act does require police and businesses, employers, universities, entities providing public services to provide reasonable accommodations upon request. And we have state laws that similarly require accommodation. And reasonable means it's not an undue burden. Has that entity provided similar accommodations in the past, or do they already? Or would help to establish whether it's reasonable or not. And then there's a little bit of difference under the federal and state law about what is a disability. Federal law says it substantially limits a major life activity, and the California law just drops the word substantial. It just has to be limits a major life activity. Those issues get litigated a lot. And if there's maybe a specific question later, we could talk more about like legal, how to take, well, what are the avenues to file a legal complaint?
Michael, I'm going to read a question out, and you can either answer this now or later, as you just shared. The
Sure.
question is, when an accommodation request is made of law enforcement, does the disabled person have to provide proof of this? For example, if police interrogate the person about their conditions and such, must the person answer, or can they say it's private?
So the last part was if the cops try to interrogate the person about the request for accommodation.
I believe it's about their particular health condition.
Okay, right. Um, So the general rule about disability accommodations is someone shouldn't have to necessarily disclose their specific disability to be able to get an accommodation. All that's legally required would be to put the entity on notice that they have a disability, and that could be expressed in terms of what is the type of limitation on a major life activity. So I have difficulty walking, for example, without, the support of a cane or a walker, or I can't walk without I need a wheelchair, is an example of how to put the police or entity on notice of the limitation, without having to say what the specific disability is. And if the cops did try to like interrogate about what is the specific condition, someone could just, say that I don't, that's private. I'm not going to say what my specific diagnosis or condition is, but I do have this type of specific limitation, and this is the type of accommodation that I need. It could help in some situations to be able to say what the conditions are because, if there was if it ends up getting litigated later, right, and the police don't respect someone's rights to accommodation, and then there's like a video or a witness that can say that, oh, look, um, this person said they have, X type of specific like respiratory condition, or other health condition that people would recognize more easily as meriting that type of accommodation, then that could help to make the facts seem more appealing and egregious. But it should not be absolutely necessary to identify what type of diagnosis or condition or disability. So like an example would be like if someone had HIV and they didn't want to let uh, everyone know about that, then that's why there's like a rule or law that says you don't have to reveal what your specific disability is or condition. All right. I'm just going to go forward to try to move quickly through the slides. And if someone has like a really important question, you can interrupt me, but there will be a session, some time at the end. Um, this slide talks about transgender rights. So technically the police and jail are supposed to respect people's chosen gender identity and expression, and put them with their specific identified gender. However, sometimes practically that has just meant that they put the person in like the solitary or administrative segregation, which might not be very pleasant. But that's what has happened in San Francisco. And also that if someone has like gender affirming body wear, they might not be able to keep it during the search. This slide talks about what are the common types of charges that we've seen for protest. This slide, I'm not going to list everyone verbally because of limited time, but these are all misdemeanors. Um, and most of the time, and like maybe we're talking about the past like 20 years, most of the time there's not been, people at demonstrations don't actually get charged with crimes, meaning like even if they get cited and arrested, the district attorney doesn't actually file the charges. But in the past maybe 2 years, we have seen a higher level of prosecution, and especially that's in this context of increased fascism and suppression of speech around Palestine. That we've in the current DA Jenkins, right, in San Francisco, they've been more aggressive in the past in trying to charge people when in the past we would not expected them to be charged. And then this slide talks about less common protest charges that we have seen with some of the blockade actions related to Palestine. I mentioned felony lynching already, where someone tries to free someone from police custody, and then false imprisonment was a charge put on people who blocked the bridge, like saying that they were somehow imprisoning people in their cars. We don't think that's legally going to stand up, but the DA has pursued it. And then also felony conspiracy to commit a misdemeanor. It doesn't make sense, but that is possible under California law. And immigration consequences can be serious for any type of crime, even a minor crime. So the best advice if someone is a non-citizen and they're thinking of engaging in a risk of arrest situation, consult with an immigration attorney first. I'm an immigration attorney, and there's people in the collaborative who can also consult about those types of questions. And California law does have a lot of different statutes that have been passed over the years intended to protect immigrants. I'm not going to mention everything specific on the slide right now. And generally speaking, employers should not be generally speaking, it would be illegal to retaliate against an employee for their protest activity outside of work. And even at work, there would be rights to speak up when it comes to working conditions or unlawful activity that an employer is engaging in or trying to require people to engage in. And sometimes people have questions about whether they have to report an arrest to some type of like licensing authority. Generally speaking, the answer is no as to an arrest. Um, it's in a conviction situation might be different depending on the type of crime. It's more of a sensitive or vulnerable situation where someone is actually applying for a professional type of license, because then there's often questions about past arrest and convictions. And um, even though typically private employers are not supposed to discriminate based on um, convictions in the hiring process, and there's certain levels of protection, certain jobs and government jobs especially
I'm
do
still
have.
trying to help. I guess this is. Uh,
Is there a question? I was saying government jobs sometimes do have more specific requirements about that require a review of criminal record. And that's also an area that I could talk more specifically about in a one-on-one if someone had a question or a general type question at the end. And there could be discipline charges at school or university too, keep in mind. And that's something that we could also talk more specifically about. I did cover this before a little bit earlier. Keep in mind that if police, ICE, FBI show up at your home or at work, remember, don't talk to them. They don't have a right to enter any sort of private home or private area of a business without a judicial warrant. That means signed by a judge. And if they do have a warrant, you can ask them to slip it under the door or through a window, and you can inspect it to make sure it's accurate and specific about the address. Or if it's maybe just for a specific person, arrest warrant for a person, that doesn't give them the right to search. And if it's for a search warrant, they're supposed to be specific about where they're searching and what they're searching for. And you don't want to physically resist the cops, even if they have a warrant or don't have a warrant. But you can, if you verbalize and assert your rights, it can help later to help beat any charges or hold them accountable. And then this slide talks a little bit about travel and customs. That, so if someone's not a U.S. citizen, they can be subject to a lot of scrutiny before they can, in the context of customs at the airport or border crossing. And I'm sure we've all heard stories right now about the increased kind of persecution, detentions, and everything. And if there's a more specific question, I could cover that later. This slide talks about provides some resources for protester rights. The National Lawyers Guild, nlgsf.org, Legal Aid at Work, legalaid-at-work.org, the ACLU.org. And I meant to add to this one the Disability Rights and Education Defense Fund link, but I think that was in the email that was sent out to everyone too. All right, those are all my slides. And this slide has my contact information. Direct phone number is 510-340-5502. And my email is michael@flowlaw.com. That's FLO-LAW.com.
Thank you so much, Michael, for your time and for the excellent presentation. We do have a number of very good questions in the chat. I want to hand over the microphone to our incredible peer advocate, Maya, who's going to be sharing a little bit about her lived experience as a longtime disabled organizer and activist in the Bay Area. After we let Maya speak, please save your questions. And Michael, if you're able to stay on for just a couple of minutes after 8:30, maybe we could ask a couple of them then. Maya, are you ready to start? Maya, you're muted.
Hi, my name is Maya Moria Soki Scott. My pronouns are they, them, she, her, and merper. And for my own access, I'm actually in the water in what I call Bed Bath and Beyond because I have a congenital heart condition that makes it hard to breathe and swallow. Um, and it helps me to show up. And I think in some ways I'm modeling something that has been a really important learning for me as someone who is born with a rare and really serious congenital heart condition that is invisible. And later in life, in the last 5, 6 years, I've become a disabled, mobility impaired, power wheelchair user as well. And so um, I grew up during the civil rights movement of the 1960s. I was born in 1966, so I consider myself a queenager, like a baby senior, and I was raised, in the streets, in demonstrations. My mom is a singer and a musician, and I was like carrying her guitar at demonstrations since I was a really little kid. So, sort of the orientation towards movement organizing, cross movement organizing, and using art as a vehicle for social and cultural transformation and as a language for connecting people is very much, the way I was raised. I can't actually see the slides, so I'm just going to riff on this. I was thinking a lot. I'm a core member of a group called Disability Justice League Bay Area that started in 2020 as part of the Black Lives Matter movement. And after Stacey Park Milburn, who is the founder of Disability Justice Culture Club, died on May 19th in the beginning of the pandemic. And so we were a time, a lot of us were dying. I lost many, many people to the early pandemic, including, close family members and chosen family. And we were trying to figure out ways that we could keep each other alive and safe as much as we could, and specifically look at what do we bring to the table as disabled people of a variety of different disabilities from a lot of different cultures and community practices. So some of the things that I would say is, first of all, it's really important for any organizers to think about hybrid ways to participate and recognize that many, many people cannot get out in the streets, whether it's COVID risk with folks not masking, whether it's people being targeted by the state and the police, whether it is many, many times as a disabled wheelchair user who uses a power wheelchair, I would say I've probably had my wheelchair die in the middle of demonstrations because I had a shitty, cheap wheelchair that was donated. And so I've had to miss like half or 2/3 of marches just because my power wheelchair died. So I've learned a lot about collaborating with organizers to shift the routes so that there are places to charge. Like we've worked really closely with Anti-Police Terror Project and MH First in Oakland. And we worked for multiple years with organizers to recognize that starting from the Port of Oakland in a place where there is very, very few places to charge, that in order to have like a powerful mass of folks in mobility devices and things that need power, and there's lots of things people need power for, the route actually needed to be changed to be able to have us kind of front and center. In terms of the optics of having a really multiracial, intergenerational, mixed ability group of organizers, um, we know that it always looks bad to be tear gassing and beating people. It looks particularly bad to be tear gassing and beating and jailing elders and people in wheelchairs, and we use that to our advantage. Fat folks, a lot of us in wheelchairs have been yelled and screamed at as like you know, tanks and whales and things like that. So some of my comrade organizers in Fat Liberation Movement, made the tank brigade. It's like, good, we're big. We've got big things. We can run you over and we can be the front line in front of the cops sometimes, and particularly centering folks who are, for me as a white person who's a light-skinned person and an elder, I might look like the grandma of some of the people that are firing at that thing. And so that using the ways of our targeting and our privilege to the advantage of what we're doing is something I've really learned as an organizer. Um, you know, I I've learned a lot about sort of hypervisibility and invisibility and ways of using that strategically. I, as someone who's like a large person with a large wheelchair, I can't be invisible because I'm hypervisible. So I've just started to be like a drag queen, glitter, glam, mermaid person out there who's very visible to the organizers, first of all, so that they can get me. In my wheelchair, I can go to the front and the back and all the way along. I can film for documentary purposes and also, for protective purposes later on in a way that folks on their feet can't. Um, and it's something I've been learning as I go, really, and really recognizing also that I'm come from the RuPaul Drag Race school of, street theater organizing, that we're all born naked and the rest is drag. So think about what you're flagging, literally, when you're out in the streets. And I do a lot of things to flag my queerness to trans folks, to Palestinian people, to sex workers, to undocumented folks. I put stuff on my wheelchair and make art so that people can see, like, I am here as a collective we. I'm carrying the voices and the images of ancestors who've already died in these movements, and also flagging, like, I'm also a mobile community center. I'm, being trained as a street medic. I have a lot of information from a lot of different places. And so I would love to see more of us trained and prepped with emergency preparedness supplies that we can help with the rest of the community bring. Because I can carry, a couple hundred pounds of things on the back of my wheelchair if necessary, and leave the house prepared to go to the emergency room. Um, so there's lots of things to say about that. I get targeted a lot as a houseless person because I have a lot of bags, and I'm a domestic violence survivor who navigated the DV shelter system and organized all the way through that, through the DV shelter system using paratransit. So there's, we need things like wheelchair accessible vans and stuff like that to help us get in and out. But I've learned that we bring special things to the table that I wouldn't have known. Yeah. And I guess the last thing is that I don't do civil disobedience because I live in subsidized housing and would probably lose my housing. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Maya. And Maya is a peer advocate working for SDA's community resource program, as well as an incredible activist who is involved in a lot of other organizations. So if you call the community resource program and want to talk to a peer counselor or someone who is disabled and has lived experience navigating benefits and complex systems, Maya might be one of the people who pick up the phone. With that, a time check, it's 8:31 p.m. and I want to see, Michael, would you be open to taking a couple more questions out loud or in writing?
Sure. I've been looking at the questions in the chat too. I can also verbally respond.
Let me uplift a couple that I've seen so far. Can getting arrested, misdemeanor, or felony affect your benefits, such as SSI, SSDI, HUD, Medi-Cal?
That's the question I was just reviewing. I did have a slide about that based on a prior presentation that I didn't include in this presentation. So let me pull that up here. So let's see. Uh, General short answer is no, but generally, even a felony will not disqualify someone from their access to Social Security disability income or Social Security supplemental income. Benefits are suspended if someone is in jail for 30 days or longer, and they will have to reapply if in jail for longer than 12 months. And I found that at the Social Security Administration government website. Um, and it shouldn't limit someone's access to the SNAP benefits or the temporary assistance. Although federal law does deny SNAP benefits to people who are convicted drug felons, but most states have exercised an option to opt out of that. including California. A small single-digit minority of states disqualify people for a felony drug conviction.
If one doesn't have a state ID that represents their chosen name and gender identity, does a trans individual have to prove that they are transgender and deserve to be placed in appropriate housing, or are they respected at their word for that?
Well, we certainly can't expect the police to respect people's rights, even when they are given notice. So if you don't like if your ID says one gender and you're verbalizing a different gender, then I certainly wouldn't like, expect or rely on the police to respect that. You could still you can still assert your rights in whatever way you can, and it might help later if something bad happens due to the failure to respect your rights. But it makes it more difficult.
Going back to the last question about getting arrested and benefits, somebody asks, what about HUD?
I, that wasn't covered in my slide, so I can't say for sure. But I have heard examples of people who had, I believe I have heard of examples of people with felonies being disqualified from public housing.
Right.
Maya, go ahead.
Well, I am one of 70,000 households in the United States that got an emergency housing voucher in the height of the pandemic under the Biden administration, and that entire program just got cut. So there's 70,000 of us that are. I'm going to be back to facing houselessness in January of 2026. And I would say, as someone who lives with an emergency housing voucher, I am very, very aware that any infraction of anything, just even as a tenant, let alone getting arrested, that every single year, my life is looked over with a fine tooth comb by the housing authority, and whatever the official thing is, I know for sure that if I was arrested, I would have a rough time fighting staying housed, whether it's under HUD or just by the. Yeah, I feel very, very aware and at risk. And so I think partly also as organizers, one of the benefits of hypervisibility is knowing a lot of people. And if any one of us get um, unjustly targeted, which millions of us are being unjustly targeted for all different reasons, one of the benefits of knowing a lot of people and being more visible is that more people can fight for us and with us if we get targeted. And yeah, and but I don't know the real deal on that. I just know that I and many, many people who fought really hard to get housed you know, are about to either have to leave the country, leave the area, or find other ways to stay housed.
I have a question for Maya or Michael. If somebody is arrested and there's a case of discrimination or otherwise targeting of someone based on their disability, what can supporters do on the outside to either add pressure or support and solidarity?
Um, Michael, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
Why don't you go first? I'm going to turn on my light here.
Well, because I have been somewhat hyper visible in some ways and also underground. I have a safe at home address through the Secretary of State as a domestic violence survivor. It's very, very hard when you're under pressure, and especially if you're in jail or if you're, underground. As a lot of, I work with a lot of trans and queer, mostly BIPOC, all disabled, very low income, domestic violence and intimate partner violence and violence survivors, trying to help people navigate multiple systems. And I would say that all of our organizations really prepping and knowing where we can get legal help quickly is a huge thing, and it's really difficult. So, I know a DV survivor who's fled the Bay Area because they're getting death threats right now, who also used to be a very, very visible political organizer. And they've called like 70 or 80 attorneys and organizations trying to get legal help with death threats. This isn't even, going to jail for protesting. And they can't get anybody to represent them. So I do really think that all of us recognizing um, that it's not necessarily people that are visible on the front lines who are being targeted, and sometimes it is. I think it doesn't make sense on some ways for me to even like try to cover my identity at this point, because I'm the only person that looks like me everywhere I go. So I just am like, I hope that at least there folks know to help me if I get stuck in jail or get locked out of things. Yeah, so that's what I would say. I don't really know like legally, but I also think that doing pod mapping and doing a lot of emergency preparedness, and including domestic violence being a target of violence and being a target of state violence in the frame of what we look at it as emergency preparedness is something we all should be really doing. And I've done quite a lot of education with folks in the Center for Independent Living, for example, that we're doing emergency preparedness just to say, people that are targets of all kinds of violence, that is also something that needs to be included, because like I had to flee my home of 20 years with 2 hours notice, and I've never been able to go home. So um, yeah. And I guess also having things like that having a community like audio and video library that we can password protect and vet who can come in to do it would be really helpful, so that we don't have to do the same education over and over again. And I do think that Senior and Disability Action is and the Center for Independent Living, I know, have been looking at how, protecting the identities of folks that come to events like this, from further, harassment, while having like a data memory bank of the wisdom that we have from our different corners and intersections of organizing. Check.
And yes, having outside people on the outside provide support for people who get arrested or jailed is really valuable. And um, it's a way to put pressure, like political pressure, public pressure on the authorities. And that has succeeded in the past, like to get, for example, the DA to drop the charges against the Bay Bridge 78 people who blocked the Bay Bridge for Palestine. Um, and but later the people who blocked the Golden Gate Bridge in April last year, that was subsequent, right? And then the DA is sticking with those charges, and they have not been dropped yet. But the public pressure can help to get someone out of jail sooner, can help to get someone like the help they need in jail, and can help to get charges dropped, can help to show like a court judge, right, that people care, and help make sure that they respect people's rights.
When you say public pressure, do you mean calling the DA, calling jail? Where are some good pressure targets if someone is detained?
So if people are arrested and charged, then they should discuss the strategy with the legal team and with the criminal defense attorneys, and figure out what is the appropriate strategy for that situation of when and how to engage in public pressure. But yes, those are examples, Liza. It could be, yes, calling the DA, calling the mayor, calling the jail if someone's in the jail and they're not getting their medications, for example.
Thank you. And I see you wrote in the chat, but I'd also like to ask out loud, can you be arrested and charged for handing out masks? Are there ways to do it more safely? Referencing the news that somebody was arrested for doing that in LA recently.
Yeah, that's the only example that I know of someone being criminally charged, arrested for that. That, of course, that's in the context of heightened persecution and fascist government practices. But sure, we've also heard about um, more like I guess cities and states passing laws that try to criminalize wearing a mask. And so if someone was wearing a mask to conceal their identity to commit a crime, then that could aggravate the criminal prosecution. But of course, if someone's wearing a mask for COVID safety, that should not. But of course, the cops could be accusing people of doing something they're not doing, right? So I wouldn't want to do that in front. I wouldn't do it in front of the cops, right? Don't be obvious about it, I guess would be the lesson learned right now. And wouldn't want to video someone doing it at the protest either, because then that could be found on the internet and used against that person too.
Could you speak a little bit more about what the law is like in terms of being accommodated regarding masking if arrested? Like if they ask someone to demask for taking pictures or demasking for the entire time in jail?
I think the police could legitimately require someone to demask for their pictures. If someone, has a disability, then it would be a reasonable accommodation to allow them to wear a mask, but you can't, I don't expect the cops to always to respect that. In a case we litigated for the Black Lives Matter protesters in San Jose in 2020, one of the complaints was that people were held in vans for a long time without masks, and that it's a kind of difficult, nuanced issue. So there's no guarantee. Like someone said that the person with the masks, their charges got dropped. It looks like, huh? That's cool. The person passing out masks, I guess the charges got dropped. Someone reported in the chat. Someone asked, is it true that ICE has been seeking information on those who have medical benefits? Well, we do know, I mean, I've heard in the news about the current presidential administration trying to change the rules or laws about, or violate the rules or laws about, like it's supposed to be, I don't know, private. It's supposed to be private and confidential and separate, like what you give to the IRS versus what you give to DHS. But they now, with the efforts of this administration, they're trying to kind of make it so that the DHS can access any and all information in government records. So I would assume that would also include medical. You would think HIPAA protections would apply in certain situations too. But we also know this government is not respecting rights or the law, so there's no guarantee. Can police demand what services a service dog provides? Well, um, you can't expect or demand that the police are going to allow you to keep a service animal in the first place. But if you were able to negotiate some type of accommodation, then it would be reasonable for I mean, part of the accommodation process is interactive process, right? Where the entity giving the accommodations is supposed to engage in an interactive process to figure out what accommodations are reasonable. And so that I could see that could involve like, well, um, requiring someone to explain why they need a service dog. And the same person asked about if they could force you to leave your wheelchair. Well, what I would expect, assuming that they, try to provide accommodations, would be that they would um, make someone uh, um, get out of the like a motorized wheelchair, and then whenever they get to the jail, be put in a jail issued wheelchair. If they were like to sort of like take someone and like leave them on the ground or, drag them or something like that, that would be really inhumane and could lead to potential accommodation claims, disability accommodation claims against the entity, police. And then someone bumped this question about how are folks feeling about the Q&A being recorded? Was it going to be turned off for privacy?
Yeah, that's a question for the group. I want to make sure that if folks do want to ask a
Okay.
question off the recording, there's space to do so. So please let me know. And I see Likia has a hand up.
Yeah, I was just thinking, so we just had the ADA anniversary. So ADA doesn't apply to jail or any, I'm just asking because,
It
if
does. It does
yeah.
apply to jail, so
So, but it doesn't feel like they respect that, right? Oh,
that's fair to say too. There's a lot of litigation about that because we've all seen and heard about the behavior of cops that do not respect people's rights and might be power tripping or take personal vendettas. Like in part of my research for today, I found a case online um, called Bell that was about like someone in the San Francisco jail who like they had kind of like a verbal, they made a request to a jail deputy and the jail deputy said something rude and they said, I'm going to make a complaint against you. And then later the jail deputy tried to use some other reason to make that person leave their cell. And they had a whole extraction unit and they made the person get out of their wheelchair and hop on one foot and they fell down. And it was like a humiliating and horrible treatment and example. And the person was suing for disability discrimination. And the court said that those facts, can amount to a violation if proven true and allowed them to proceed with their claims. And the jail does have policies about accommodations that I requested and obtained too, where like, their policies look legit, right? But how and whether they implement the policies correctly is always another question. I see Maya. Maya has a question. Do you have
It
a
wasn't so
question, Maya?
much a question as it was a comment.
Okay.
That I have been, involved in many different solidarity. I've had family members in jail, and I have also grew up with a number of people that were political prisoners. And I would say that this is a time not only to, I mean, always it's a time to support political prisoners and people who have been unjustly jailed. But right now, there's a real intersectional focus of all different movements, very much with Palestine and Sudan, and a lot of us may be jailed in this process, as every liberation movement has had. And I wanted to lift up a moment with Brother Satawa, who is a really beloved political prisoner who was wrongly convicted and was in jail for 43 years, 2 months, and 5 days. Because I was able to get a wheelchair accessible van, was working really closely with Anti-Police Terror Project. We were able to get a wheelchair accessible van to pick up Brother Satawa, who had had a stroke in jail and was released in a manual wheelchair with no way to get home. And so this is also something that, again, looking at what we can do to support folks when we do get arrested and when we're in jail, and also really talk to folks that have lived for lots of their lives in jail, who have a lot of wisdom. And we've had a Disability Justice and Disability Rights Coalition doing housing advocacy. There's a huge coalition that has about 50 organizations in it that's been working for years to look at how to support folks coming out, regardless of how they went in, to be able to get housed and get accessible healthcare and access and stuff like that. So that's something, again, if that interests you and you either are part of those communities or want to have more solidarity. Most of the disability justice groups that have been collaborating are pretty deeply connected with prisoners' rights groups as well.
Thank you, Maya. I want to begin our wrap up. There's a couple of questions in our chat, and I want to ask folks if there's a final question that you have, please share it now. Question, could you recap what redress steps someone has after a protest or after exiting detention if their ADA rights were violated? Maybe like what most
Sure.
immediate steps should someone take after that happens?
So, in general, with in the context of disability accommodation or any like legal claims, it always looks better, and sometimes it can be legally required too. Like if you're actually in jail, you have to exhaust the administrative remedies that are there, and so that could be a jail grievance form or a reasonable accommodation form that the jail might provide. That'd be something just to ask for. Um, with to the jail personnel, and then you could escalate from there. To be able to sue for someone who is incarcerated, they have to exhaust the administrative remedy process available, or their case will get kicked out of court. If someone's outside of court, it might not be necessary to file an administrative complaint, but it could still be a good strategy to try to sort of escalate things right, and hopefully it gets resolved sooner without having to resort to litigation, because litigation can take years and may or may not be successful on technicalities. So there could be the California Civil Rights Department is a state agency that's pretty good, and they accept complaints based on employment discrimination or public accommodation discrimination, including disabilities. That's calcivilrights.ca.org, the California Civil Rights Department. And then there's certain federal or state agencies that also have their own complaint processes for entities they regulate, like the Department of Education, for example, would accept civil rights complaints. Even DHS has, like, typically every government agency has its own sort of civil rights department or Office of Civil Rights that as an optional avenue to file a complaint. And then you could talk to an attorney about filing a lawsuit. It's always good to take action as soon as possible because there could be short time limits to file complaints. And I appreciate what you had to say, Maya, everything you contributed to, because I strongly agree. Our movements are always stronger when they're inclusive, and people with disabilities have a long history of being at the forefront. And it helps everyone to, I think, feel united and stronger, and that, to know that everyone can participate. Thanks for sharing, Liza, the calcivilrights.ca.gov website.
And I also want to uplift another part of what Maya said, which is to support and learn from political prisoners who um, have been living this experience or continuing to live this experience. There's a lot that we can learn from folks who are inside jails and prisons.
For sure.
Here's a question for folks who use canes or crutches. Is it likely that cops would handcuff them? Is there any risk of canes, crutches being taken away, potentially seen as a weapon?
There is a risk, yes. And the person could still get handcuffed. They should verbalize any special needs or verbalize, there are a lot of cases out there of people who, even though they verbalized the need or an injury, the cops still handcuff them behind their back. I litigated a case against San Francisco police where they tore the guy's shoulder out of the rotator cuff because he had a pre-existing injury and jerked his hands behind his back. And the city attorneys defended it vigorously, and it was very difficult to get to a settlement on that case. So that those things do happen. But the general advice we discussed earlier about providing notice and the information about why, documenting it, are important to be able to exercise those rights.
Along the same lines of something being considered a weapon, if a person goes to a protest and has pepper spray with them, will that get them in trouble? For example, many women carry pepper spray in daily life regularly.
Well, it could get in trouble if the cops are in a situation where they think that you're going to use it on them, or you threaten them or something, or cops sometimes try to justify their actions later by saying the person had this weapon on them. But I could see how if someone carried it with them as a regular matter of self-defense, and then they're getting arrested, and the cops ask people like if you have weapons on you whenever they pat you down or arrest you, so you could just say, I have, I have this in my pocket, and then and they're not trying to use it on the cops, then you would think that should be safe. But of course, the general advice would be to not bring anything that could be construed as a weapon with you to the protest.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions, but folks correct me if I'm wrong about any that I haven't uplifted yet. Hmm. Can you talk a bit more about what court support entails? Is it just that the greater number of people are there, the more seriously a judge would take the person's case?
That's certainly part of it. I think part of what led to the Bay Bridge 78 people getting their charges dropped were some boisterous gatherings in the courthouse. If a judge sees that there's a whole bunch of supporters out there in their room, then they're probably going to act a little bit differently than they might if it was just the litigants and the lawyers there. And court support, what court support looks like in any situation is going to involve on the particular circumstances and the charges and the people, what the people want. Sometimes people might not want to have their name out there, but they're being charged with something too. It could lead to problems at their job or housing. So every situation is different, and the different strategies of public advocacy might be appropriate in some situations that might not in others.
Thank you. I have a final question. What are ways that non-legal folks can support the efforts of movement, lawyers, and other legal solidarity efforts in the Bay Area?
Thank you. I think that we're all here to support each other, and the general tips and information I shared earlier about like what are the roles of the legal team and then the organizers, kind of address that issue about how to communicate well in advance about requests, follow up as needed, um, help to collect do the appropriate steps to gather any urgent information needed about like people in jail who have urgent needs, and the information on the arrestees to help us track. Um, and uh, there's different types of legal organizations that have maybe different specific requests about support. I see. Oh yeah, I think you shared the ARC Bail Fund. So I think they gather donations for that. Um, NLG, I know is open to people who are not lawyers to join if you want to get trained as a legal observer.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks everyone.
We'll have one last question for Maya and then wrap. Maya, someone would love to hear more from you about how actions can be made hybrid, power chair users involved in demonstrations, and peripheral or support tasks physically disabled people can do. Is there also a space that somebody could continue to talk with you about that after the event?
It's a great question. Let's talk after. Disability Justice League Bay Area and Disability Justice Culture Club are sibling organizations that are all, coming out of the 10 principles of disability justice that Citizens Invalid created. Our group started specifically around street uprisings in the height of the pandemic. So that's like been the central focus of it. There's not just one thing to say. But I think I would actually recommend our group did a presentation for the intersectionality and disability summit back in 2021 when we were just a year old, and we're now 5 years old. But I think it would be a great time to get our group, maybe in collaboration with Disability Justice Culture Club, to do a reflection and kind of real world about what we've learned in the last 5 years of organizing. And we did record that. it's a little bit hard to find on YouTube, but it is on YouTube, that first year reflection. And let's talk afterwards about doing a recorded thing. And I think doing a series, like a monthly series, we're in such urgent times that I think we always need to hear from attorneys because that is a big part of it. But healing from healing justice folks, street medics, continuing to train. It's kind of and there's in disabled organizing, there's often a lot of conversation about sort of conflicting and cross disability organizing. And I started doing a lot of live streaming at demonstrations at the request of disabled people who could not come out into the streets, who wanted to feel like it was there and feel a part of it. And part of what we have done. And so I would love if there is any way to do training where I can have folks be that I could do live streaming while blurring out faces or something. I could use more training on how to do that, but I can very easily live stream where I am. But I am aware of this conflict between potentially putting people more at risk for the visibility. Of course, we know the cops are filming us anyway. So I do think that anybody that comes out to a demonstration should cover their faces if possible, or if not, know that that is a distinct possibility that we, there will definitely be government and police surveillance of these demonstrations. But I think there's a in terms of history making and grassroots media work, I think there's a really important place for social media and really, really low tech grassroots documentation to show that we are there. And yeah, we could talk more. We've done some successful things where, like, while I'm speaking or filming, I'll be working with the organizers to have a list of the hashtags and the action things. It also can be done. We have very frequently, we could do password protected Zooms where we tell the community in advance that we're going to be live Zooming during the demonstration, when we could work on having more security about who can get into the Zooms, and then have off-site folks who are working on computers to cut and paste the action items that folks that are not physically there can do to support. And I think there's a lot we could do with that. We could actually, I mean, like Crip Camp, if folks saw that, the online Crip Camp that happened in May to July of 2020 after Stacey Park Milburn died, they were expecting maybe 100 people to come together. There were 5,000 people coming at a time from all over the world to those camp online sessions. It was a huge community building thing. And so we might look at that, about really looking at cybersecurity and password protection and stuff like that. It's better than live streaming in that way. But if we had one or several people live filming into a Zoom, we could get some of that thing where there could actually be movement building and amplification. And yeah, Disability Justice Culture Club did that brilliantly during the Moms for Housing in 2019, 2020, when the cops came in and evicted these whole families in the middle of the night. They were live streaming actions for disabled people could do in the middle of the night. I was at home, unable to leave my house in it without a power wheelchair at that time, but I stayed up all night reposting what was being posted on social media to try to mobilize more things. And that's something we won. It was a huge movement win. And disabled organizers had a huge part to play in that, for sure. It was really what partly made me realize, I go, oh, wow, okay, I can't walk very well, but there's a lot that I can do now, being part of, creative community comrades.
Thank you, Maya.
You're welcome.
All right, everyone. With that, I want to give a big shout out to our presenters, Michael, Maya, SDA staff and members, our CART captioner, and Spanish interpreter for making this event possible. Thank you all so much for joining us, for staying for an extra almost 40 minutes, for all of your engaging questions and commitment to building cross-movement solidarity. I'm really hoping that this event can help empower people to take action, to assess what types of actions you feel comfortable attending, to learn how to look out for people at actions that you might want to support, and overall build our collective capacity to fight back in the Bay Area. Thank you so much. I'm going to post a final link about our annual celebration happening later in August if you'd like to attend and support SDA. And if you would like to have more events like this in the future, please reach out to us. We are more than happy to make this an ongoing series. And I will be sharing the recording, chat, and presentations in email. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.